Hello everybody, welcome to this wonderful educational initiative called Na Урок. I'm very pleased to be here again, to be the speaker for this wonderful conference, and I really welcome my respected colleagues. And we will start off with me telling a little bit about myself. So today we'll be talking about building rapport with your teenage classrooms to boost successful learning. And my name is Anastасія Шамрай. I have spoken for this project a number of times. I'm a CELTA and Delta teacher and teacher trainer. CELTA is a Cambridge certificate of English language teaching to adults, in fact. However, there is an extension that I have received to teach teenagers and younger learners. So I think I'm entitled to talk about building rapport with teenagers. I have taught English as a foreign language to younger learners and teenagers and adults for over 15 years. As you can see, I am a scholarship winner at an international conference called I8 TOEFL of 2015. Since then, I have done a lot of professional development. And I would like to share a little bit of my history with teaching teenagers. I started off when I was 22 years old. And since then, I've had lots of success stories. I've had teenagers who later became students of Ivy League universities of the United States. I have had teenagers who kicked the door into my classroom, who were pushed into my classroom by their parents, who told me overtly how they didn't want to study any English, let alone study it with me. I've had teenagers who had pink hair, mohawk hairstyles. I've had young boys with black nails on their hands. I've had all sorts of teenagers, and so I believe that there is something that I can share with you today on the topic of building a productive and warm relationship with them. More or less, I could summarize my entire webinar into one sentence. I will be talking about how to learn to like this audience, how to learn to like these people, and how to learn to cooperate with them as an adult. So, today we will start off with discussing rapport and why it matters at all. We will create a portrait of, let's say, an average or a typical teenager, and a portrait of a teacher that might suit this demanding audience. We will go over some do's and don'ts. And mind you that this webinar, in fact, is a matter of quite an anxiety to me, you know, because when I spoke for Na Урок before, I spoke about theoretical issues and practical issues that I had learned from Cambridge and practiced along since then. But today I'll be talking about something that stems from my own experience as a classroom teacher. I don't think it's documented anywhere. Of course, there is psychological and other scientific foundation behind my experience. But the recommendations that I will be giving today are just pieces of advice. So you can follow them or you may not follow them if you don't find it suitable for your context. So, you know, it's a combination of theory and practice today. That is why I'm not saying do only this way. You might find your own ways of building rapport with your teenagers, but these are some practical tips that have proved working, have proved effective in my classroom. So, what is rapport? It's not a word that you might come across very often. It's kind of like a book word, but what it really means is that kind of relationship, harmonious and close, where you feel mutually connected, where you appreciate each other's effort, where you understand each other's feelings, needs, and learn to communicate well. Why does rapport matter? You've probably heard from lots of teenagers that you might have taught in your classrooms that they dislike a particular class because they dislike a teacher, because they don't trust her, because they believe that she shouts rather than helps, because she criticizes, and there are a number of other reasons why teenage learners might dislike their teachers, but if that happens, unfortunately, that might ruin their entire motivation to learn whatever you set out to teach them. That is why building rapport makes the atmosphere comfortable for both sides and allows both teachers and students to be focused, concerned about one another, friendly to each other. It allows to share information in a healthy atmosphere, accept each other's ideas and contributions, and create learning opportunities together. So, and here is the question. I really want you to participate and put your answers on the chat. So, how would you describe the character of a typical teenager that you might have taught in your classroom? I understand that teenagers are people and they're different people and all of them greatly differ from one another, but there are probably some age similarities that they might share and that you might have noticed they have in common. So I would like you, my colleagues, to put a few characteristics on the chat as for how you would describe a typical teenager that you encounter in your classroom. I've already got some great answers here. So teenagers seem to be emotional, creative, even crazy, rebellious at times. I'm waiting for some more. Oh yes, they're cool. Quite agree. They know what they want. They are stubborn and smart. They tend to be impatient, proud of themselves, vulnerable, tricky. That's how a teacher would describe motivated, sociable, and rude at times. However, it's not their fault, as someone points out. Self-confident and ambitious and hardworking, and sometimes embarrassed, curious, studious. Oh wow. Demanding and sociable, and ambitious. They're keen on technology. That's it. So I see that you've got quite an experience teaching teenage students. They are like hedgehogs. I like this comparison. Can be tolerant for some, insecure. Okay, now I have created my own list of descriptions, and I want to go over this list and explain myself a little bit, how each of these characteristics works. So these are located here not in order of importance or in order of strength of manifestation, no. It's just, I just put them randomly here. And when I put this list together, I thought of comparing teenage learners with younger learners and teenage learners with adult learners. So as opposed to younger learners, teenagers have already got what I call, or what researchers call, metalinguistic strategies. That is, they already understand how languages work. And if they don't, you are still allowed to use terminology with them that will help them to understand how language works. So basically, you can teach them about the language using some theoretical terms to describe this language. Whereas with younger learners, you cannot still do that because they don't have the strategy to process these metalinguistic terms. As opposed to younger learners, again, the figure of a teacher doesn't play such great a role as it used to. And as opposed to adult learners, teenagers have quite a lot of energy to invest into learning. They have all the time on their hands. When adult learners have jobs and families and other responsibilities, teenagers don't. And it's just a matter of engagement, whether they will eventually learn or they won't. But as a methodologist called Penny suggests in her methodological work on communicative approach, teenagers are believed to be by far the best language learners. You probably know that there is a term called language window. That is the age gap when learning a language proves to be the most successful. And that language window starts from the early age of, say, like from birth, right? The age of 3 for some classes. And it is believed that it closes at around the age 15. So basically what it means, if younger learners don't start learning a language up until they turn 15, about that, I think it's a bit individual for different people, they might never master this language at the level of a native speaker. They will master it as adults. However, they will never reach the level of confidence of a native speaker. So it is crucial to begin by the age of 15. And teenagers, because they have all the energy and all this engagement, they are indeed very passionate about what interests them and very energetic, and they can involve a lot of their power and energy into all that learning. However, as I put here, they question authorities. What do I mean here? Today, we are living in the era of internet, of social networks, of a wide resource of information. And so our teenagers will always question us as to whether we have more to give them than the internet. Do you, teacher, know better than I can Google? And that is our role as teachers, to actually let them know and persuade them that we are able to teach them something better than Google can do. When I say they're emotionally challenged and challenging, that is, I refer to all the hormonal change that these people are going through at this time of life. And obviously, yeah, so there is a question that I've seen. I'll just finish a moment and I'll answer that. So they go through hormonal change at this time of life. And that is why this hormonal change brings them to the search of identity. And they have to forge this identity among their peers. And their peers' opinion becomes really important to them. And they might bring outside problems from their families as well. They might bring the misunderstanding that they face from their family into the classroom. And that is why they question us as teachers, as authority. They challenge us emotionally. They sometimes push us to the limit. But they would be a lot happier if these problems did not exist. If we, as teachers, managed to control, managed to coordinate with behavior in a constructive and friendly manner. And that is why I'm coming to my next question. But before I do, I would like to answer a question. A colleague of mine is asking, what is the difference between young learners and teenagers? Well, it's basically two different age groups. In communicative methodology, younger learners, so students aged from about 5 to 11, are referred to as younger learners. And those starting from 12 and above are referred to as teenagers, because at this age or so, they start undergoing this physical change that causes all the characteristics that I have just described in this slide. So anyway, my next question is this. What sort of a teacher could possibly satisfy an audience like that? It is a demanding audience indeed. And that is why it poses a lot of challenges to us as teachers. So what do you feel a teacher should be like to be successful in this kind of classroom? Intellectual, creative, active, patient and modern, loving and caring. A teacher must be a friend, a colleague of mine is saying, understanding, cool and smart, and brave too. A universal soldier, very positive, tolerant and experienced. The one who's on the same page with teenagers, using technologies. A real actor, some say, on the same wavelength and independent too. Okay, somebody's saying that there's a combination of professionalism and artistic approach. Young, able to be empathetic, with a young soul. You see someone specifying that age in fact doesn't matter that greatly as being young inside. Imaginative and up to date. There must be mobility and flexibility and artistry and an ability to teach critical thinking. Yeah, that's the skill of the 21st century. Someone who's interested in teenagers and open to new ideas. Someone who has a sense of humor. Someone who's easygoing and psychologically prepared. So you guys are really covering what I'm going to talk about. Obviously, I have compiled my own list, and I'm going to share it in a moment. But you're really covering it all. So this is what I've put here. So I would start with the yellow and dark blue items here on this list. I suggest that a teacher should learn to take a keen interest in people as such, and should be enthusiastic about their subject. This is really a good place to start, and this takes me back to the previous slide where I said that our teenage students question our authority, like how much we can teach them, how much better can we do than Google. So being enthusiastic about your own subject and being a lifelong learner really proves our students that we are able to teach them something useful, something that will bridge school program with their worlds, with their experiences, something that will tell them that school and learning and English, they're not outdated. They're life important skills, and it's up to us to build a bridge. So, and the second really important factor that I was going to mention about a teacher is that a teacher should be in the first place a person, because people like people, and people learn from people, people come to people. So what can help you to show your teenagers that you are a person? First of all, please take different roles as a teacher. Don't just stand in front of them the entire time, you know, telling about the new material and controlling and asking and error correcting. Monitor sometimes. Sometimes be a friend. Sometimes be an actor. Sometimes be a teaching aid. You know, when we explain things through miming, through making facial expressions, we act as teaching aids, right? We act as material in the classroom. So, explore different teacher roles that might show them that you are also a person. Talk about your life. You all have families and friends and interests and hobbies outside classroom. Be ready to share those with your students. Be ready to talk about your personal experiences, stories. Tell a bit about your family. Share what you're interested in. If it pops up in the context, why not tell a story about your past, about your teenage experience, about what your life is when you're not a teacher. You know, sometimes when I was a student and I saw my teacher coming out a bathroom or walking along a supermarket of those times, obviously, I was so surprised. I didn't realize a teacher also goes shopping and goes to bathrooms, you know. But we are living in this day and age when this should not surprise our students, when this should be obvious that we teachers are also people and we have a life. And we have emotions too. That's why when you feel like you always have to be smiley, you always have to be positive, you always have to be like a role model or something, this is not true. You have to be who you are. You need to be a person. You do have emotions. You might be annoyed. You might even shout sometimes because people shout sometimes. However, it should not be your main method of communication, right? It should be, you could do that as a way to demonstrate that you have emotions, that you are a person too, that you might be hurt. However, you are an adult and you know all the adult ways of communication with your teenagers, and you will know how to bridge these gaps. Yes, it is very important to just be who you are, be yourself, and share that a bit of yourself with your students. And when they see that you are an interesting person, they will be inevitably interested in you. And like realizing that you are an interesting person makes you feel interested in other people too. And it makes you think of teenagers as someone who also have a life, who have hobbies, who have interests, who might be talented in something, even if they're not talented in particularly your subject, but they might be talented in other things, couldn't they? So please be yourself, be interesting, share stories, and take an interest in your students. Also, yeah, it is very good indeed to have psychological education for teachers. I'm not sure if I'm in the right place to recommend, but it is also quite good for teachers to go through therapy and talk to psychologists themselves, because people in helping jobs, such as teachers, and doctors and psychologists themselves, they often require a brush up on their mental condition, on their mental health. They often require some help from the outside to be at peace with themselves. So it's just a recommendation. You might follow it, you might not, but it might prove helpful if you try. So anyway, I'll go over to the main thing that I'm here for, is what you could do, what you definitely shouldn't do, and some practical tips that might help you to become more in touch with your teenage learners. So our main role as teachers is to create a safe, supportive, and learner-centered environment. See, when I say safe, it means that students are allowed to make mistakes, and they will not be criticized for those mistakes. They're allowed to make mistakes in terms of their language use, grammar, vocabulary, whatever you might think of. And they're also allowed to make personal mistakes, because they're learning to build relationships with people and with this world. And they don't have as much experience as we do. And so it is our role to make sure that they are safe here, even if they make a mistake, and they will be forgiven. When I say that the environment should be learner-centered, that means I recommend building a bridge between what you have to teach according to your school program and what your learners need today. Try to link those. Try to link the program to what might feel up to date, to what might feel important to them. Safe and learner-centered also involves a lot of pair work. Pair work is in fact a topic of a separate webinar, but I will briefly explain what I mean here. So whenever you ask your students to deal with a practice exercise or a listening task, or answer a set of questions to your reading text, before you ask them the answers, please allow them to check the answers with a colleague, with a partner. Please allow them to sit together and mumble those answers. Gain some more confidence. While they are doing that, that's a valuable time for you as teachers to walk around and monitor, to see how they're dealing with the task, whether it was too hard or too easy, which students coped with it better and which students didn't cope that well. You might provide some individual help if necessary at this stage. And by doing this, you will avoid putting your students on the spot and calling the students who don't feel confident enough to answer this particular question. As a teacher, you will monitor and you will see, okay, student A is confident with question 1, and student B is confident with question 2. And why put an inconfident student on the spot? Why create an atmosphere that will make him feel uncomfortable, bad, and humiliated? You know that people don't remember what we say to them. People don't remember how we make them feel. So if you manage to make your students feel safe and comfortable, they will be really eager learners. Another important thing is to comment on your students' behaviors, on your students' performance. It's inevitable. We as teachers do comment on those quite a lot. However, never comment on the learners themselves. Make a clear distinction between commenting on a person and beginning your sentence with "you are such and such and such," and commenting on their behavior. Remember to address their behavior with so-called I messages. For example, I feel neglected when people say this to me. Don't resort to when you say this to me. I feel unimportant when people say that to me. Or I feel very sad when my students don't do their homework on a regular basis. So it's an I message. You comment on their behavior, you don't comment on them. And if you manage to make them feel that you are a person by then, they will understand. They also feel sad sometimes, don't they? And so if you feel sad, they can relate to that feeling. Then I suggest thinking of teenagers as young adults rather than children. That is, please show appreciation of their contributions and ideas, even if they are sometimes out of place, even if sometimes they're irrelevant to what you are doing. Still, appreciate, pay attention, find a time when you can address your teenager's comment, find a time when you can answer their out-of-place question. And yes, take an interest in how they live outside classroom. You will probably know that lots of teenage students enjoy Japanese cartoons, manga comic strips, TikTok videos. I do suggest taking a moment and taking some interest in these new forms of art. Understandably, US teachers are very busy, but look at that as an investment rather than a waste of time. So if you read a bit of manga comic strips, that will like open a door into your students' world a little bit. And that will give you an opportunity for a creative task afterwards. Find out about celebrities. Find out who Valia Carnaval is. Find out who are some popular TikTok bloggers that your students might be fond of. They will be surprised. And again, when you find out about those celebrities, I don't want you to think critically of them. I want you to think, to learn about them with curiosity, to see how life is like today, and to see what world your students will be living in later on. It is very important to not interrupt or make fun of your students, of their interests, of their outfits. But I will talk about that when I move on to the don't slide. However, I'd like to answer a question that I've got right now. So what should I do if a student doesn't like to work with a partner, but prefers to work alone? What are the ways to make pairs so everyone feels comfortable and safe? Yes, there indeed are students who prefer to work individually. And as a teacher, you should provide options, you know? There could be tasks where all of the students are allowed a chance to work individually. However, there could be tasks where all of them are required to work with a partner. And if required, you might speak to that person individually and explain your motive, like why you are doing this. Explain what's the background, what's behind this technique, like why you want them to work with a partner. They might see their own role as a helping aid, not only as if they are just repeating something. They might realize their role as an assistant to their partner who's maybe struggling more. And there's one more. So if a student makes mistakes while speaking during a lesson, okay, you're asking me about error correction. Indeed, it's a topic for a separate webinar. It's quite a large topic. There are different ways to error correct. You could correct things on the spot, but I would do that only if your student is making a mistake in something that you are teaching right now. However, if they're making a mistake that has no relevance to the current topic, you might put it on a piece of paper. And then, at the end of your lesson, you might put all the sentences on the board where your students made mistakes. But just take a quick note, it won't take you long. And then take about 7 minutes at the end of your class and put those sentences on your whiteboard and have a discussion of that. This technique is called delayed correction. This doesn't put your students on the spot. This provides feedback. This also this tells your students that you've been listening and you've been paying attention. And they will most probably recognize their own sentence. However, others will be unaware that it was student A or student B who said that. So, and now back to the main topic of our today's conversation. So what you definitely shouldn't do, or what hasn't proved effective, so please don't judge or criticize your learners in public. I particularly mean criticizing them as people, criticizing their looks, their appearances, clothes choices, hairstyle choices. With teenagers, you could face all sorts, right? You could face with piercing, some wild nail colors, wild hair colors. And so you shouldn't really speak about that in public. However, sometimes our school policies require that we talk about such things. That is why, if you see it absolutely necessary, do speak to your student in person. However, don't be judgmental, but explain yourself that there is a school policy that all of us follow. I, as a teacher, also follow a school policy, and I also follow certain rules. So could you just please stay in touch with our school policy and respect it, as we all do, but do that in person with an iMessage. When I say don't put your learners on the spot, I've briefly mentioned that before, that sometimes they don't feel confident about whether they know the right answer or they don't. Please use the pair work stage and monitoring stage as a proof that you are checking on your students' confidence, that you are calling on the right student to answer a particular question. So please don't aim to humiliate, don't aim to call somebody out there and have them be silent and feel bad about themselves and humiliated, because they will remember this experience and they will relate it to you as somebody who has invoked this experience on them. So nominate carefully, that's what I'm here to say. And my third quite important don't is don't call for any assistance from outside your classroom. I mean your superiors, head teachers, directors, parents, or anyone, if you think you're able to deal with it on your own. As a grown, professional, educated, psychologically healthy teacher. And most issues that we face are such that we can deal with on our own without any outside help. There are a couple of reasons why we might call for outside help. This is when, there are two in fact, when our students harm their own health or other students' health, and when they are performing antisocial behavior. Antisocial, that is harming the emotional health of other students or the teacher. And again, antisocial behavior might show itself in different extents. And so if you absolutely see it vital and necessary to call for outside help, in that case, do it. Yeah, somebody says that everything sounds perfect when it's not in reality. Well, I will say that, as I said from the start, I've had students being pushed into my classroom by their parents, kicking my door, and kicking the door in, kicking the door out. So I'm not trying to draw a perfect picture. And what I'm talking about is a matter of work, is a matter of, I would say, a year or two. That's the time, that's enough to build a good rapport with your teenagers. Step by step, one by one, you have to prove that you actually like them, that you actually know what you're doing, that you are able to control and monitor and respect at the same time. You see, it doesn't happen in an instance. It doesn't happen in a moment, in one lesson. It won't happen in a week or two. So it's absolutely imperfect at the start. But the more you progress, the better it becomes. So hopefully I've answered that comment. Yeah. Oh, that is repeated. And here are some practicalities. Begin your lesson with a small talk. I understand that it might take a while. But small talk is no small matter. Please ask your students how they're feeling, how their weekend was, or where they've been recently. Take an interest. Your small talk could be I will return to that question just a bit later. So your small talk could be made more specific. I speak about that later. When you subscribe to your students' Instagram accounts, or and you are involved actually, so your small talk could be more specific. You could base your small talk on something that you can see in their stories, in their posts. However, with subscribing to Instagram accounts, you should beware, you should be careful, because you should only do that once you feel your students perceive you as a safe person, as someone who's non-judgmental, non-critical, someone who's not gonna make fun of them once they post something on their Instagrams. Support. And yes, going back to small talk, either ask general things, just how are you kind of thing, and how you're feeling, and what did you do, and and remember what they say to you, and go back to what they say to you later on. Ask them how the party was, how their birthday was celebrated and stuff, what they got as present. Importantly, learn your students' first names. I put this on here because I know there's a culture of using your students' last names in the classroom. I wouldn't recommend that, even if it feels a bit uncomfortable, even if some names repeat. Please create variations for your students' names. Like, I'm putting an example here, like Lyra and Valerie, and make sure that your students remember that particular first name you're using for them, and make sure that they like it, that they agree to it. Also, my teachers, my students always call me Nastya by my first name. I've never used a patronymic in my practice. I understand that it might not be the right practice for school. However, you know, we're living in a modern world. Why not? Then, please start a Telegram chat with each group. It's quite a useful tool. And there are a number of things that you can use it for. Use it to remind homework. That won't give your students a chance to say that they've forgotten what it was. just pop in a little bit of a notice. You might send in screenshots of handouts if your students tend to lose those. And in that case, they won't have another reason to say that they've lost a handout. So, and that will also help you keep track of what's been happening in your class, like a register, you know. You could organize joint events with the help of this Telegram chat. For example, I'm taking my students to the movies. Quite soon we are watching an English language movie, and then we are having a short discussion. So I'm going to use my Telegram chat as a way to vote for the movie that we'll be watching, and as a way to put comments afterwards. As a teacher, please text in English from day one. They can use different tools to translate your speech if for whatever reason they don't understand you at first. Now, when you speak English to them in class and you speak English to them on the chat, they will understand your style more, and they will get used to what you do, and they will understand and join in eventually. Students are generally quite reluctant to join in English language conversation. However, with some time going, you might impose a language code on them. Yeah, Viber chat, Telegram chat, I don't really mean to mention specific messengers. I just mean use a messenger chat and use it to remind homework, to send handouts, to text in English, because at times, guys, you are the only role model that your students actually have. You are the only source of living English that they hear from a person, not from like videos and stuff, but from a person. So do your best to show as much English, to demonstrate, to let them hear as much English as you possibly can. And the Telegram chat is also a good source to do that. And only with time, introduce an English language, an English-only policy for both teachers and students. At first they're reluctant, they fight, they text back in Russian, and you just gradually remind them, okay, this works in English, and please do, and they try, and when they make mistakes, and they feel, obviously they might feel bad, but please don't use your Telegram chat as a field for error correction. Don't. Use it as a field for support. It's a safe place, it's a place for encouragement, it's a place to discuss, it's a place to organize, it's a place to remind, but it's not a place to error correct. However, if you choose, you might later on pick out some sentences from your chat that your students have written in there and put it on the whiteboard one day, you know, for a delayed error correction event. But don't do that right there and right then. Now, something that links to being interested in your students' lives outside class is giving them creative tasks, such as recently my students made a video of each other drawing something, and they told the background story of what they were drawing. That was like 1 minute long, but that was impressive. They sped it up. Another student created a manga strip for me. There is a lot more drawing than English, but still there are some speech bubbles that they put here and there, and those speech bubbles are in English. And when you use their manga strip in the classroom, you can use it as a foundation for a story. So what is happening in each picture? You can use it as a unit of practice for your present continuous lesson, I don't know. So you can use it as a teaching aid for practically anything. And, okay, now I've nearly got to an end. A particular practical example of how you deal with a teenager, not just general. You know, a particular practical example would be to a particular practical question. You know, how do you deal with a teenager who has black manicure in your classroom? How do you deal with a teenager who just, you ask them, how are you? And he just sits there and doesn't say anything? How do you deal with a teenager who you ask a question and he just looks away? You know, how do you deal with all these? For example, if a person doesn't answer anything to you, make a comment on that and say, I see you feel uncomfortable answering right now, but I will get back to you like in a couple of minutes. You might feel better. If they have these black nails or some extraordinary hairstyles that don't work in the classroom, talk to them in person. Explain your school policy if the school policy exists. Generally, all of this is about learning to like them, learning to treat them as you would treat any other adult, with respect, with consideration, with I messages, with mature emotions, with being able to talk about your emotions and being able to understand other people's emotions. Yeah, I understand that some of you might have different beliefs, but this is still something to start with, something to look into, you know. Cannot speak. They come after school to 2 years of online studies. They cannot even read. See, Elena, this is a practical question, and to answer that question, I would have to know more about this class, about their experience, about their backgrounds. So, yeah, I quite agree that focusing on skills is more important than focusing on looks. However, I mentioned that because there are schools that have policies on looks as well. Anyway, there are a couple of quotes here that I've put on a slide. You might take them home and read them more carefully. These come from renowned English language teaching methodologists, somebody trusted, somebody who's written books on specifically communicative approach. So just give it a read at some point, and thank you, colleagues, for being here with me today, for participating and supporting and asking questions. I really appreciate an opportunity to see you and an opportunity to speak for this wonderful educational initiative. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day. If there are any more questions that I can answer in these couple of minutes left, I'm ready to do so.